Hey everyone, Stephanie Gold here with another Make It Monday video for Papertrey ink. Today I have a fun little fall card for you, and I am going to show you a couple different ways that you can wrap twine and ribbon on your card as opposed to the standard wrap around tie a bow kind of thing. So here I have 3 die-cut wreaths from the Twig Wreath collection by Heather Nichols, and they're cut from white cardstock, and I'm just going to glue each of them together to make a little more sturdy piece of cardstock die-cut. I also cheated a little bit and I used the Stampers Select cardstock to die cut with, which I don't normally do if I'm not stamping, but this allowed me to just use these 3 wreaths as opposed to doing like 5 or 4 different pieces to glue together, so it saved a little bit of time. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some natural twine and I'm going to cut off a pretty good sized chunk of it and I'm going to wrap it all around my wreath. Now once it's completely wrapped around, I'm going to tie it in a little knot to secure it in place, and then I'm just going to set it aside for a second until I'm ready to use it again later on. So next I'm going to take out the Beautiful Berries Autumn Stamp and Die set, and I am going to die cut first all of the berries from white cardstock, Stampers Select white cardstock, and then as soon as I have them cut, I am going to stamp each one of the berries in 3 different shades. The first color I'm going to be using is Cocoa Bean, and I am going to stamp the stem of the largest berry cluster in the cocoa bean right on there. And then as soon as I'm done, I'm going to, of course, clean your stamp off, and then we're going to get the next color ready. So for step 2 of this stamp, I'm going to be using Saffron Spice, and this is going to be the fullest part of the berries. And I'm just going to put them together, line it up really nicely, and not worry too much about any mistakes or anything. I am huge on imperfections. I think it adds character. And I just think it makes it a little fun and different. So don't worry too much if they don't line up perfectly. The next color I'm going to be using is Simply Chartreuse, and this is going to be just a little bit of accents on the bottom of each berry. I'm also really huge on not using naturally correct or scientifically correct colors. I kind of just go with whatever color selection I want and in my mind call it an abstract interpretation. So now I am stamping out the smaller berries, and I'm going to use the 3 same exact colors, the Cocoa Bean, the Simply Chartreuse, and the Saffron Spice. So once my berries are completely stamped out, I'm going to set them aside for a moment, and I cut a piece of craft cardstock to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I'm going to run it through my die cut machine with the wood grain stencil to emboss the front of it. Now that our craft cardstock is good and embossed, I have a piece of the Bitty Big Simply Chartreuse plaid paper cut to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and I am going to adhere it to the front of the craft cardstock with some dimensional adhesive. Now, I didn't make one of these cards ahead of time, so I'm sort of making it up as I go along here, and I'm going to just kind of lay my pieces out and see how I want my layout to be on my card, and once I get a good feel for it, I take most of the pieces off and I start working on the ultimate goal. So I decided to put my sentiment on a white strip of cardstock, and I am going to use from Sunflower Harvest the Autumn Blessings stamp, and I'm going to stamp it in Smoky Shadow ink. Now, this sentiment came out a teensy bit crooked. Forgive me. It's really hard to stamp when you can't put your head right on top of what you're stamping. I have no idea if you guys know what I'm talking about, but to keep my head out of this shot, I had to sacrifice a little bit of crookedness on my sentiment strip. So once again, I am just realigning things up there and making sure I have exactly what I want to do. And now I am going to go ahead and adhere my sentiment right on top and then trim the edges so they don't hang off a whole 1.5 inches on each side. Now I'm ready to start putting all of my pieces in place with adhesive. So I'm going to use a 1/4 inch score tape for my large berries, and I'm going to just kind of put that one right on the side, push it down nice and flat, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my wreath right on top. And I am going to put Tombow Mono liquid glue right on each piece of the twine. So, because the paper isn't going to be able to touch the card front. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it right on the twine and push it down. And what I like to do is use an acrylic block to kind of weigh it down a little bit until it dries. So that's what I'm going to do here while I get the dimensional adhesive on my 2 smaller berries. So I apologize, I went a little out of frame here, but what I'm doing is putting a little bit of foam tape on the back of these smaller berries, and I am just going to kind of pop them up a little bit. You guys know I love my dimension and my dimensional foam tape. And I'm just going to go ahead and stick those right on the side and just kind of accent the wreath even more. So now I'm going to use some of this Fresh Snow twill tape ribbon from Papertrey ink, and I decided I wanted to put it on a little differently than just a normal wrap of a bow or just like a little tied bow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my card front right onto my card base, and I like to use my 1/4 inch score tape for that again. This score tape doesn't go anywhere, at least in Arizona, so it works really, really well out here for keeping things in place. And then once the card front is exactly where I want it and secure, I decided to use a hole punch and punch I'm so sorry I went out of the frame again a little bit, punch a pretty good size little indent right below my sentiment strip on either side. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to use that as a little anchor on each side for my white ribbon. And I'm going to just kind of squeeze it in there as a little extra added something fun. So I ended up just tying a knot right over top the rest of the card front. And then to finish the twine off, I decided to tie it in a little bow and sort of intertwine the ends and trim them up a little bit to finish the card off. You know, fold the card base and you are good to go. I love how this card turned out. I loved being able to show you guys some different ways that you can use twine and ribbon on your cards as opposed to the normal, you know, bow that you wrap around, which I also love. So I would love to see what ideas you all come up with on some different ways to use twine and ribbon on your cards that are creative and fun and out of the box. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.